Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me. Send me $3,200 for prom. My sister texted like it was my duty to fund her night of glitter and selfies. I typed back, "Earn it yourself." 7 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. Pay or get out of this family. That one wasn't from her. It was from my parents. That night I sat in my apartment staring at the blue glow of my banking app. My fingers hovered trembling. Then I pressed it cancel. Cancel, cancel, everything. By 9:00 the next morning, my life was no longer theirs to drain. It was finally mine. But I had no idea what kind of storm was about to hit. Before I share my story, I want to know you are here with me. Just say listening in the comments or let me know where you are. I love hearing how far my story reach. Sometimes even the smallest connection can make a story feel heard. Thank you. And now here's my story. My name is Ethan Cole. I'm 33, and I learned the hard way that sometimes family love comes with a bill. If this story hits you somewhere deep, don't forget to subscribe and stay with me. I have more to tell. Stories of truth betrayal, and the moment you finally take your life back. By the time the conference room door clicked shut behind me, the words were already burned into my screen. Send me $3,200 for prom. Maya wrote like my wallet was a family tradition. The picture that jumped into my head wasn't sequins in a stretch limo. It was me at 18 hosing off pickup trucks at a car wash after school, the sting of winter water in my hands, the steam rising off the pavement while I counted tips to cover textbooks. Maya's feed, by contrast, had been a film reel of luxury glossy shopping bags, mirror selfies, weekends that looked sponsored. I typed what I should have said years ago. Earn it yourself. 7 minutes later, another message arrived, colder than the first. Pay or get out of this family. It wasn't from her. It was from my mother, Linda Cole. My father, Richard Cole, followed with a shorter echo about doing the right thing. I set the phone face down, felt the old childhood chill run up my spine, and excused myself from the table. The hallway outside was a glass tunnel 20 stories over downtown Seattle, the kind of high that makes you feel powerful and small at once. The city blinked beneath me. Clean lines, tidy grids, everything in its place. Everything I had learned to control except the one thing that kept calling itself family. That night, the blue light from my laptop made the apartment feel like a tank at the bottom of the ocean. Capitol Hill hummed beyond the windows. I opened my banking app and scrolled the transfers to our family account, the one I'd created to keep the lights on and the water hot. The one I told myself was for groceries and heat and the kind of emergencies that make you grateful to be alive. Every month was a notch of kindness with a receipt. Somewhere deep in my head, my father's old line played on loop. The lesson he loved to hand me like a chore. A man handles his own. I realized I had been handling everyone's. My thumb hovered. Then it dropped. Cancel, cancel, cancel everything. I killed the autopays, revoked every link, removed the authorized user cards I should have never allowed. I watched the confirmations arrive like lifeboats in a storm. I wrote a single line in my journal. From now on, love doesn't ride on a wire transfer, and closed the book with my palm flat against the cover like I was swearing it in. An email chimed a second later. Access change successful. Another pinged on top of it. Unrecognized device signed in. My scalp prickled. I clicked through and saw a timestamp that didn't match the minutes I was living. I told myself I'd dig tomorrow. I scrolled back through the history, and 2 names snagged the eye like Fishhook's Nashville prom planner and Everton Capital Holdings. Nashville made no sense. We lived in Washington State. Everton made a different kind of sense I didn't want. Second liens balloon notes, the kind of paperwork that looks like a solution until it swallows the house. I shut the lid, stood in the dark, and caught my reflection in the balcony glass. A man about to trade a last name for a spine. At 9:00 a.m., I promised the ghost in the window I'd face the truth and see who's still standing when the dust settles. The next morning, I took my promise to a small cafe on Pine Street, where the barista knew my name and the chairs always wobbled a little. Jenna Morales slid into the booth across from me, set her latte down, and waited without asking. She is that kind of friend. I started at 18 because that's where the thread begins for me. 2 jobs, 1 body, 1 bed I barely used. After school, I'd punch in at the wash bay breathing steam and soap the coins clattering in a plastic tub. At night, I stocked shelves at a grocery store and memorized vocabulary for AP English between pallets of paper towels. Meanwhile, for Maya's 11th birthday, our yard turned into a rental kingdom. There was a clown who made roses out of balloons, a bouncy castle that squeaked with every landing, a 3-tier cake that left purple frosting on everyone's teeth. I remember because I took the photos. I remember because it was the first time I saw the equation written out. I was the labor. She was the party. At 19, I left home for Bellevue with a dented suitcase and a promise to pay myself back one day. No allowance, no care packages, no calls except the ones that needed something. I built a life, brick by brick. When I was 27, the phone rang with my mother Linda's voice wrapped in urgency. "The roof is leaking," she said. "Just for a month, Ethan. We need to patch it." "We'll pay you back." The words were reasonable in shape and tone, and something in me wanted to be the son who could fix a storm with a transfer. I opened a joint account with a small limit for essentials, groceries, utilities, heat. I told myself it would be short. Then the month after that, another repair. Then the one after that, a surprise bill. Just this month, Shed repeat a lullaby for grown-ups who should know better. The limit crept, the logic stretched. And I wrote a private rule in the dark confrontations break families' money holds them together. I didn't realize I was volunteering to be our silence provider. The list of emergencies grew a personality. One week the car died. Another week insurance spiked. The power company called. The water bill doubled. I moved the numbers around and sent the fix. But on the same days the lights allegedly flickered. Maya's posts glowed. A new bag held up like a trophy in a mirror that loved her. A boarding pass angled just so on an airport table. A resort room with a view big enough to make you think the planet existed to be looked at. I asked gently where the money for the roof had gone, and my mother laughed the small laugh that says you're being dramatic. "She's young," she said. "Let her enjoy things while she can." The thing about being told you're dramatic is you start editing yourself out of your own story. I learned to nod. I learned to wire. I learned to measure love in dollar amounts and to forgive myself for knowing the conversion rate. Jenna listened the way nurses listen to x-rays. "You opened the account to keep a house dry," she said, "and somehow you became the weather." I smiled because it hurt and because it was true. I told her about the texts from yesterday, about canceling the auto pays, about the strange device login, and the 2 names that wouldn't stop tapping on the back of my skull, Nashville Prom Planner, Everton Capital Holdings. "Nashville," she said. "Why Nashville?" I shrugged. I didn't know. I did know the word mortgage had started to feel like an animal pacing a fence line. I refused to look over. "Maybe it's time you looked," Jenna said. Not at their explanations, at the ledger itself. Back at the apartment, I opened a notebook I keep for when my head gets noisy and wrote a question in block letters. Is family a lift or an invoice? I didn't add the question mark. It didn't feel like a question anymore. Love can survive a storm, I wrote beneath it. It can't survive a leak you keep pretending isn't there. The old rule about avoiding fights to keep the peace cracked right down its middle. Peace built on lies is just quiet. By late afternoon, I had stopped pretending I could think about anything else. I pulled up the account again, scrolled back farther than the app wanted to take me, and watched the month snap into years. There were patterns inside the patterns. Payments that hit on the same day every month to a company with a name that sounded like it had an office and a lobby and a receptionist, but probably lived in a P.O. box. Small charges and clusters to boutiques with cursive logos, travel agencies, a prom planner in another state. I felt the kind of clarity that doesn't come like a beam of light so much as a tightening of the lens. I texted Jenna that I was done asking for explanations and ready to pull records. I picked up my phone to call a lawyer I trusted from a project downtown, a man named Daniel Hart who knows how to read blood and bank statements. I didn't press dial yet. I stood in the kitchen, palm flat on the counter, and gave myself 15 seconds to breathe. Here's what you don't see on a spreadsheet, the part of you that would rather keep paying than admit you were never loved for free. I knew that part of me was loud and practiced. I also knew a different part had spoken the night before with a thumb and 3 clicks. Cancel. 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 Those were not just buttons. They were a sentence. They were the first 3 words of the life I was about to write. And so, I set an alarm for 9:00 a.m. the next morning. Not a promise to them, not even a promise to the version of me staring out of the glass, just a commitment to begin the work of facing what I already suspected. Within the week, I would have the history downloaded, the statements printed, the names circled in ink that doesn't wash out. I would stop being the invisible son who solved invisible problems. I would look at the truth until it stopped blinking. The email came through just before sunset, the screen flashing its warning, and read, "Large transaction alert. $6,500 withdrawn." The timestamp stopped me cold. It was from that same morning, the exact hour I had hit cancel on every automatic payment tied to the family account. For a second, I thought it was some lag, a delay in the system catching up to what I'd done. Then I read it again. I read it. The money had moved hours after I shut them out. Someone had found another way in. I called my mother Linda first. The line clicked twice before she answered, voice sharp with practiced authority. "Ethan, what's with the accusations? You think we'd steal from you?" She didn't ask what the withdrawal was for. She didn't even sound surprised. "I said I closed the account, Mom. How did $6,500 still go out?" she snapped. "You closed it on your end. That doesn't mean the bills stop. You think it's all about you?" Her tone folded the conversation in half before I could respond. The click of the line going dead landed like a door slam. I called Maya next. She picked up on the third ring music thumping in the background, laughter rising behind her. "Hey," I said. "Where are you?" She sighed, annoyed. "At a party, obviously." "Why?" "Because $6,500 disappeared today," I said. "You know anything about that?" She groaned. "God, you're so dramatic. It's just money. You always make everything a crisis." "This isn't about money, Maya," I said. "It's about lying." She laughed, the kind of laugh that means you're boring me. "You really need to relax," she said, and hung up. For a while, I just sat there in the empty office, the lights around me dimming automatically as the building switched to night mode. My reflection floated over the city through the window. Tired. Older. The kind of man who keeps trying to hold up something that never wanted saving. Then I remembered a name, Daniel Hart, the attorney who had helped my firm through a contract audit last year. Smart, calm, no nonsense. I pulled out my phone and texted him. "Need to review a joint account. Something's wrong. Tonight, if possible." He replied in minutes. "Lotto office, 6 Harborough. Bring credentials." His office sat above a brick street where the windows glowed amber and the sidewalk smelled faintly of coffee and snowmelt. Daniel greeted me with his sleeves rolled up, tie loosened, a man built for long hours and long truths. I handed him my laptop and every piece of login info I had. 4.5 years of data, I said. "Pull everything." He nodded, fingers moving fast. "Don't confront them yet," he said without looking up. "You need a full-picture timeline, amounts, destinations. Facts don't bend when someone cries. The records loaded line after line, a heartbeat in numbers, payments to boutiques, jewelry stores, a travel agency, monthly transfers to Everton Capital Holdings, each tagged with the note, "Second lien." I felt my stomach twist. "That's the house," I said. "They took another mortgage. They never told me." Daniel leaned closer. "Then that's your leverage. You can't fix what you don't see." We worked in silence for a while, the hum of the heating vents marking time. I scrolled back farther and spotted Nashville prom planner again. They spent almost $3,000 on a prom planner. "In another state," I muttered. Why, Daniel shook his head. "We'll find out. But first, let's export this. You'll need hard copies." He pressed print, the machine spitting out pages like confessions. Then my phone buzzed. A new voicemail icon blinked. I hit play without thinking. Maya's voice filled the room, soft, conspiratorial. "Mom, Dad, just tell him to pay. He always does. He's used to it. If we don't send it today, they'll find us." The message cut off. My throat went dry. I looked at Daniel. "That $6,500 wasn't random," I said. "It was a deadline. They weren't begging for help, they were covering themselves." Daniel didn't answer right away. He opened another tab, searching through access logs. Then he frowned. "Ethan, this account had an additional verified device added last year. See this email? Not yours, but connected through a trusted link." I leaned closer. "Who added it?" He tapped the screen. "Someone logged in from Bellevue, your parents' address." The rest clicked fast. The reason I hadn't seen all the alerts, the missing statements, the hidden withdrawals, they'd redirected the notifications. They'd built a tunnel straight into the money. I sat back dizzy. The air in the room seemed thinner. "So they've been inside this whole time," I said, "even after I closed everything." Daniel folded the file, his tone steady. "The financial part we can fix," he said. "But the rest, you need to decide what you want. If your line is about boundaries, keep it shut. If it's about truth, dig until it bleeds." I nodded slowly. "Both," I said. "Money's done. But I want to know exactly what I was paying for." When I left, the streets were quiet except for a bus sighing at a stoplight. The city smelled of wet pavement and cold metal. I tucked the folder under my arm, 54 months of history printed and bound. The weight of it felt like years. At home, I wrote the date of Saturday's drive to Bellevue on a sticky note and stuck it to the fridge. Beneath it, I wrote in pen, "Am not their wallet anymore. Am the one who keeps the books." The drive up to Bellevue that Saturday felt longer than usual. The highway slick with early snow. The file sat on the passenger seat belted in like a witness. Every mile unspooled a memory. My father Richard showing me how to edge the lawn. My mother Linda baking lemon squares for the church fair. Maya in the driveway learning to ride a bike. Those scenes used to smell like summer. Now they smelled faintly of debt. I said it out loud once to the windshield. I'm not going there to save them. I'm going there to end it. When I pulled into the cul-de-sac, the house looked smaller, as if the walls had drawn in to hide their secrets. My mother opened the door before I knocked. Her expression was polished and cold, like she'd rehearsed it. My father stood behind her, arms folded. Maya was on the couch, face bent toward her phone, pretending not to notice. No one said hello. My mother just asked, "Did you bring the money?" I stepped inside, dropped the folder on the coffee table. "No." I said I brought proof. I spread the papers out in rows, the black ink loud against the beige wood boutiques, jewelry travel agencies, prom planner Nashville. I looked up. "Do any of these look like bills to keep a roof over your heads?" My mother's face hardened. "How dare you dig into our private accounts?" I said private. "I paid for every one of them." My father stepped forward. Voice strained. "You don't understand, Ethan. The bank's been threatening foreclosure. That $600 or $500 you're obsessed with that kept us from losing the house. I stared at him. So you took a second mortgage? He hesitated. My mother filled the gap. Since the year you opened the account, we had to. It was for Maya's education, for her future. I turned to my sister. Your college fund. She looked at the floor. Then I asked the question that had been scratching at the back of my head for days. Why a prom planner in Nashville? We live here, Maya stammered. It was just a recommendation. Someone online. Before I could press, Daniel's voice crackled from the phone I'd left on the table. He was on speaker, waiting for my call. Ethan, I ran the names you gave me. Nashville Prom Planner is a shell company owned by the same people behind Everton Capital Holdings. It's how they hide the debt payments. The room went still. I could hear my mother's breath catch. I looked from her to my father. So you weren't trying to save the house, I said. You were trying to hide how deep you were already in. My father's face darkened. You have no right to talk to us like that. I pulled another page from the file and slid it across the table. You made this about rights when you added her. Printed in bold was a line item, authorized user Linda Cole. My mother's eyes flashed. Where did you get that? I'm the account holder, I said. I get to see who's been spending my money. The silence that followed was its own confession. They'd opened a secondary card under my profile 2 years earlier, using it to buy whatever the budget of guilt could afford. My mother's voice cracked. We were just trying to keep our dignity. I said quietly, dignity isn't something you can buy with someone else's balance. The air was thick enough to choke on. My father stared out the window, jaw tight. Maya wiped at her eyes, but said nothing. I gathered the pages, slipped them back into the folder. I'm done, I said, and walked toward the door. My mother's sobs followed me down the hall's mall, practiced the kind that used to pull me back. This time, they didn't. That night in Seattle, the messages started. My phone buzzed until it burned in my hand. You've destroyed us, my mother wrote. If the house is taken, it's on you. My father added. Maya's came last. You're selfish. You have everything, and now I have nothing. I turned the phone face down, stepped out onto the balcony. The wind off the Cascades was sharp, alive. The city lights below blinked like 1,000 quiet exits. This isn't destruction, I said to no one. This is what rebuilding looks like. I stayed there until the phone stopped buzzing, until the night finally felt like mine again. Daniel's office felt smaller that morning, as if the walls had been pulled inward by the gravity of what we were about to open. He logged into the bank's secure archive while I sat across from him, coffee cooling untouched in my hands. Every transaction that appeared on the monitor was a heartbeat of the last 54 months. Each number looked harmless until you remembered what it stood for. Birthdays I missed because of work phone calls that ended in guilt, and all the times I thought I was saving them. When the system finally finished loading, the total stared back at me, $128,000 spread across 132 separate transfers. 4.5 years of quiet surrender. Daniel started tracing patterns on the screen, aligning dates and recipients, matching recurring notes with calendar events. You see this one, he asked, pointing to a column of transfers marked Everton Capital Holdings. These happen like clockwork every month. Same amount, same timestamp. I leaned forward. Mortgage payments. He nodded, then opened a corporate registry search. The company's listed director was a man named Robert Lang, a name I recognized from my father's golf trips. That's one of Dad's old friends, I said. Daniel scrolled down the file. He owns multiple shell companies registered to the same address. Everton is one of them. They've been cycling debt through each other to make the liabilities disappear on paper. The realization landed heavy. It wasn't just money mismanagement. It was manipulation dressed as survival. My parents hadn't just used me. They'd turned my trust into collateral for a lie. Daniel shut his laptop halfway and looked at me. Ethan, you need to decide how far you want to take this. Reporting it means you're testifying against them. I stared at the numbers still glowing on the screen. And not reporting it means I let them keep using my name. I didn't answer for a while. Instead, I opened my notebook and wrote, "Between law and loyalty, you'll have to choose." Later that week, the King County Business Ledger ran a story on its business page, "Local Family Faces Foreclosure. Cole home in debt over $520,000. The photo of the house was old, taken in better years. I had no idea who leaked it until Daniel traced the article's source. It wasn't the bank. It was the real estate broker who'd been trying to offload their property for months. My mother texted the moment the story hit the feed. "Ethan, please make this stop. People are talking. Don't let anyone find out about the account." I typed back one line. "No one would know if you hadn't taught me to keep secrets." That night, the guilt sat heavy on my chest. Not the guilt of doing wrong, but the guilt of finally drawing the line. At 1:00 in the morning, my phone buzzed again. Maya's voice cracked through the speaker, small and scared. "They're fighting Ethan. Mom says it's my fault for calling you. She told me to ask you to forgive them. I just want things to be like before." I rubbed my eyes. "Before was when I paid every bill, right?" She didn't answer. "I'm done buying peace, Maya. If the truth hurts, it's because it's real." The line went silent except for her breathing, and then she hung up. Afterward, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my desk under the dull glow of a single lamp and wrote an email to the bank. "Please confirm closure of all accounts associated with the Cole joint family profile. Any further activity is unauthorized and will be investigated." My fingers hesitated before hitting send, but once the message left, the weight began to shift. Outside, the horizon was turning silver. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed the sunrise to anyone. The war wasn't over, but the ground finally felt steady beneath my feet. The letter arrived 3 weeks later, buried among utility bills and marketing flyers. Heritage First Bank request for verification. I tore it open on instinct and felt the breath leave my lungs. The line at the bottom read, "You are listed as co-signer on a secondary lien for the Cole property. Attendance required for verification hearing." My name was on a mortgage I'd never signed. The next morning, Daniel and I sat in a glass conference room downtown. A representative from the bank slid a copy of the loan agreement across the table. My digital signature glowed at the bottom, neat and perfect. "That's not mine," I said. "Our records show it was signed electronically from a verified device," she replied. Daniel leaned forward. "Check the IP." The rep clicked through the data and turned the screen toward us. The address was unmistakable, the family house in Bellevue, my father's home office, the room where he'd taught me how to balance a checkbook. On the drive up that afternoon, I rehearsed what I'd say, but the words kept dying in my throat. When I reached the house, my father, Richard, was in the living room, posture rigid, the air heavy with whatever passed for shame. My mother, Linda's eyes were red. Maya hovered near the stairs. I held up the document. "You used my name to secure a loan," I said. No one spoke. "You forged my signature. You dragged me into a $500,000 debt I didn't agree to." My mother finally whispered, "We didn't see another way. The bank wouldn't approve us a loan." I turned to my father. "And you thought stealing from your son was a way?" He looked away. "You have good credit, Ethan. We just needed a bridge." I almost laughed. "You built a bridge out of fraud." My voice cracked, but I didn't stop. "Dad signs my name. Mom hides it. Maya pretends not to notice. And I'm the one who's supposed to keep paying for all of it. That's not a family. That's a pyramid scheme." My mother, Linda, reached for me. "Please, don't make this public. We can fix it." "Fix it," I said. "You've been fixing it for years, and look where that got us." She cried harder. "We're out of options." "No," I said. "You ran out of honesty. When I turned to leave, my father, Richard, blocked the door, a folded paper trembling in his hand. I drafted something he said. The heading read, "Family Agreement. Ethan Cole assumes 50% of outstanding debt." I looked at him, then at the page, and tore it in half. The only thing I'm responsible for is my own life. The sound of paper ripping broke whatever was left between us. My mother's knees gave out. Maya screamed. I stepped around them, walked to the car, and didn't look back. 2 days later, Daniel called to tell me a lawsuit had been filed. Plaintiffs, Richard and Linda Cole, defendant Ethan Cole, claim emotional damages and failure of familial duty. The absurdity almost made me laugh. They weren't trying to win. They were trying to punish me for leaving. I forwarded the summons to Daniel with one line, "Handle it." He wrote back minutes later, "It's time to stop defending yourself and start fighting back." That night I stood by the window of his office watching the snow settle over Seattle's rooftops, soft and relentless. The city looked quieter than it ever had, like it was holding its breath with me. Daniel's words echoed in my head. "Don't just prove they're wrong. Prove you've changed," I whispered to the glass. "I will. Not to win, just to be free." And for the first time, I believed it. The courthouse in Bellevue smelled faintly of pine cleaner and old paper. Outside, snow drifted like ash in the air, melting the moment it touched the glass doors. Inside, everything was still, too still. Daniel walked beside me, his briefcase heavy, the kind of weight that means something final. Today, he said quietly, "You don't talk for them. You talk for yourself." I nodded. I could feel the rhythm of my pulse against the wool of my coat. Each beat matched the crunch of snow under our shoes. In the courtroom, the air carried that metallic chill of winter and anticipation. Across from us sat my parents and their attorney. My mother's hands were clasped too tightly, her knuckles white. My father stared straight ahead, his jaw locked as if he were still trying to control the narrative by sheer force of will. Maya wasn't there. I wondered if she couldn't bear to see it, or simply didn't care enough. The judge began the proceedings with a voice that filled the room like a verdict itself. "Richard and Linda Cole versus Ethan Cole," he read. "Plaintiffs allege violation of familial duty and financial abandonment." I almost smiled at the phrasing. Abandonment. As if I'd been the one draining their account. My mother Linda spoke first, trembling just enough to seem sincere. "Your Honor," she said, "our son cut us off when we needed him most. We were left with debts, with no warning, no compassion." Her words were clean, polished, memorized. I kept my gaze fixed on the table, the wood grain blurring as she went on. She had always been good at making her pain look noble. Daniel stood. His tone was calm professional, but the precision of it sliced through the air. "Your Honor," he said, sliding a folder forward, "the defense would like to submit 4.5 years of account statements, over $128,000, transferred from Mr. Cole to his parents' account. The plaintiff's debts were paid with his earnings. There are 32 irregular transactions, fake invoices, falsified receipts." He placed another document on the judge's bench. "This is not abandonment. It's financial exploitation." A murmur ran through the room. My father Richard dropped his eyes, pretending to read something that wasn't there. My mother stayed perfectly still. For the first time, she had nothing rehearsed to say. Then I rose. My hands were steady, which surprised me. "There's one more thing," I said, handing over the loan file from the bank. "This second mortgage, my name appears on it, but I never signed it. The data logs show the signature came from my father's home computer." The judge's eyes moved from me to my father. "Mr. Cole," he said, "did you sign your son's name?" The silence that followed was the longest I'd ever heard in my life. My father's shoulders sagged, and he gave a small nod. My mother's breath broke into a sob that sounded almost practiced, but even that couldn't fill the silence. "I don't want an apology," I said softly. "I just want the truth to live somewhere besides my guilt." The plaintiff's lawyer tried to salvage something. "Your Honor, they only wanted to protect their home." I turned toward them. "A home built on forgery isn't a home. It's a lie with a roof." The judge read from the file again. "All evidence points to unauthorized use of funds and fraudulent application of signature. The court rules that Mr. Ethan Cole bears no legal or financial responsibility toward the plaintiffs." The sound of the gavel struck the air like thunder breaking over snow. Case dismissed. When I stepped outside, the world had gone quiet again. Snow covered everything, the steps, the street, the tops of parked cars. I stood there for a moment, just breathing, watching my breath mix with the cold. Daniel shook my hand. Said something about meeting later, but I hardly heard him. My hands were trembling, though not from the chill. The cord that had tied me to them all my life had finally snapped. Then I heard my mother behind me. "Ethan," she called, her voice smaller than I remembered. I turned. She came close enough to touch my sleeve. "You won," she said, her eyes wet. "But you lost us." I looked at her hand still gripping my coat and said quietly, "I didn't win. I just stopped paying to be loved." She let go, and I walked to the car. In the rearview mirror, they were just two dark figures in a storm that no longer belonged to me. Halfway down the mountain road, I pulled over at a scenic overlook. Bellevue Valley stretched out below, the lights shimmering through the last fall of snow. I rolled down the window, the cold wind biting my face, and wrote in my notebook, "The day I lost them, I found myself." 6 months later, I woke every morning to the sound of wind rushing through the canyons near Rattlesnake Ledge. My new apartment sat high enough that the horizon burned orange before the city even stirred. I drove the same route each day down winding roads lined with sandstone cliffs, their surfaces glowing like embers in the early sun. For the first time in years, my life moved quietly, without demands or alarms. The bank app stayed closed. The phone no longer buzzed with guilt. I made coffee, watched the steam curl upward, and realized peace doesn't announce itself. It just replaces the noise. The past still found ways to reach me. One afternoon, a message from a former neighbor in Bellevue popped up on my phone. "Thought you should know, your parents lost the house. Foreclosure went through last week. They moved to a small rental in Linwood." I stared at the words for a long time. There was no triumph in it, just an ache that didn't know where to sit. I pulled out an old envelope I'd been keeping in my desk, a letter I'd written months earlier but never mailed. "Mom," it said, "I don't hate you. I just wish you'd believed I could love you without paying for it." I folded it once, then again, and stepped outside. The sun was strong, the kind that erases shadows. I lit the letter with my lighter, watched it curl into ash, and let the wind take it. The smoke disappeared into the open sky like a confession finally heard. A few weeks later, I saw Maya again. It was at a grocery store near Renton just before closing. She was bagging groceries at the end of the checkout lane. For a moment, she didn't see me. When she looked up, her eyes widened, then dropped quickly back to her hands. I placed my things on the belt coffee bread oranges. When she handed me the receipt, I said, "You doing okay?" Her voice was quiet. "I'm working. It's not easy, but I'm learning." I smiled. "That's good. I always knew you could." For the first time, she met my eyes, and something unspoken passed between us. Not forgiveness, but recognition. Driving home that evening, I felt lighter. There were still ghosts in the rearview mirror, but they no longer steered the car. One morning, not long after, an email arrived from Daniel. "Case officially closed. Court record sealed. You're free of all obligations. I'd say you won, but the truth is you escaped." I wrote back, "Freedom isn't running away." It's choosing not to stay chained. I hit send, and for the first time I believed every word. That weekend I hiked the trail behind Rattlesnake Ledge before dawn. The air was cold and thin, the kind that clears everything out of you. When I reached the top, the sun broke over the cliffs, spilling light across the valley. The rocks burned red gold, and for a second the world looked brand new. I closed my eyes and breathed. Let us know in the comments or just write what this story made you feel. If you liked it, hit like and subscribe. It really helps us keep sharing stories like this. YouTube picked this for you. Tap it. Let's see if they guessed right.